This is the Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Miles Lasater of Purpose Built VC. Miles, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
Can you tell us how you got into early stage investing?
Well, I started as a founder. I started my first venture while I was in college, built that up, and we're lucky enough to take that public with my co-founders, achieve some real scale before we sold that business, and then started two other venture-backed businesses. Along the way, met a lot of great founders and started doing some angel investing as I wanted to support them and complete the circle of investing and founding. So that's my window into this investment world.
Well, that's great. Well, you run Purpose Built Ventures. What is the purpose of that fund and what do you do with it?
So we invest in founders looking to solve problems that increase human well-being, increase opportunity, and improve the public sphere. They have a strong sense of passion for building commercial successful ventures, for creating something at scale, and also for creating positive externalities. And these mission-driven founders, I believe, are an important group that have been successful to date and will be even more so as we see a new generation of founders coming up. It's really exciting to work with companies like AltSchool and Honor and Remix that I've started investing in personally and then now investing through Purpose-Built Ventures in the same space.
So who is a good fit for your fund? We said mission-driven, but what's the specific criteria you're looking for? For example, do you take pre-revenue companies, and can you be more specific?
Sure. We focus on seed stage, the earliest stages. So the first $1 million that a company is raising is really our sweet spot. Sometimes we'll go a little bit later than that. Obviously, the more that a founder has been able to demonstrate and to accomplish while they've been working on the venture and the velocity that they have, the proof points or domain knowledge obviously all help. And it's not as if we're against revenue, but certainly willing and have made many investments pre-revenue, sometimes even pre-product, depending on the situation. We want to be a partner working alongside the founder at those very earliest stages and being a part of that wonderful moment of saying yes when you know that the world is crying out for a solution, is crying out for some type of new company that needs to be built. And you grab that and say, let's make it happen.
So can you dive more into your investment thesis? This mission-driven is a little bit different than what we've heard before. Can you tell us more about it?
Sure. So I have a background as a commercially successful founder, taking a company public in a fintech space. I understand the dynamics of business and want to be financially successful for our investors and for myself. I think that for many founders these days, that's not enough just on its face and alone. They want to make sure that they're solving a problem that matters more broadly. And so these founders and the way they position their companies, they get a competitive advantage in recruiting better talent and being able to retain that talent for longer, as more and more ventures are really limited by the quality of the talent that they can recruit into the business. So that's one big advantage. Two, they've got an advantage in the marketplace as they position against other companies. I think you've also seen that the reputation of Silicon Valley and of the tech industry in general is entering a more mature phase where people have even used this term techlash. They're starting to see that there are trade-offs to the large tech companies that were originally loved as they were growing, but now have demonstrated that they need to be thinking more broadly about their impact on the rest of us. And companies that position themselves from the very earliest stages to contribute more broadly will do better in that kind of environment. So looking for technology companies, software-enabled or tech component, strong component there, but also looking to increase human well-being, increase opportunity for people, and to improve the public sphere. Geographically, focused primarily on the U.S. I've got experience starting a fintech business, starting a civic tech business in SeeClickFix, and starting an ed tech business that was serving emerging markets. So I've got some experience personally as a founder in a number of different industries, and have invested in a number of digital health companies and other sectors. So the sector focus, is broad as long as you're tackling those kinds of problems. But the stage focus is very narrow, looking at companies that are at the pre-seed and seed stage who are really building the business from the beginning.
It seems like mission driven has a lot to do with building a very strong culture in the business as well. And of course, the advantage of having a strong culture is similar to what you mentioned. You recruit better people, you have a better progress, etc. But how do you see culture fitting into the mission driven approach?
So culture is, I think, critical to successful knowledge driven companies. When your assets are less tangible in the business and your ability to continue to execute and stay ahead of competition and meet customer demands depends on having the very best people, as increasingly true in technology businesses, has been true and increasingly true. That means that culture is going to be what drives the retention and often the recruitment as well. People will come to the company for the culture. I've seen that firsthand when we built Hire One. We won multiple awards, including National Great Place to Work multiple times, and I was an internal champion for building that culture. It starts with being able to articulate clearly what the culture means, both internally and externally, and then founders and senior leadership living that culture, being able to articulate what are the behaviors that come from those lofty goals that you'll state in your culture. Write it down, communicate it, have orientation towards it, reward people for it, point it out and hold people up, tell stories. I mean, this is a very powerful way that culture gets transmitted, is when you're highlighting particular stories that people can remember as humans. That's what we more easily remember. And seeing the recognition and what's honored and what's rewarded in a company will be the key, I think, to continuing to build that culture. I love working with founders on culture issues.
What are some portfolio examples of people that had a strong culture and were strongly mission driven?
It's hard as a investor to know the details of every culture and how it's experienced by employees. So I don't want my comments to be taken as a particular endorsement of internal culture. But I do know, working with founders, when their burning passion for their mission is part of the fabric of why they started that company. I'll give you examples that go back a few years and maybe more well known than some of the more recent investments. Seth from Honor with his co-founders communicated from the very beginning with me as I was investing in that company about wanting to make sure that our parents had the care that they needed to stay in their homes and to age gracefully. And Honor provides in-home care for seniors and for our parents. And they've done a great job in articulating that externally and I think internally, as far as I know. And it led to certain key decisions in the business as it was evolving. A lot of business pressures or other reasons might push them towards like 1099 employees who are contractors. They made the decision to do W-2 whenever they could. And I think that helped strengthen the culture, make everyone feel on the same page. I hope that's an example that's useful for you.
Well, what are some examples where they could have used more mission-driven or more culture? What's the downside of not using these approaches?
Well, I wouldn't want to name any names to criticize people, but I have seen cases where management sees the rest of the team members as being expendable in some way and not worrying so much about turnover, pushing people to be measured by, the hours that they put in rather than by the outcomes that are achieved, and not clearly communicating what they want the culture to be or else not acting by it. I think that can undermine trust even more if you're claiming, for example, to be an open communicator and transparent, but then keeping secrets back and not providing information to employees. I think that can be pretty damaging. And I've seen circumstances of that.
So what's the next step for your group and your fund? Where are you with it right now? And what's the next step?
Well, Purpose-Built Ventures, as a formalization of my investing, is relatively recent. So we're still at the stage of getting our name out there and introducing ourselves. So we have been making investments throughout this year. having a blast, meeting a lot of great founders, and want to continue doing that.
Well, that's great. And what would you tell entrepreneurs that come to you that you wish they should know about you before they walk in the door? You see many entrepreneurs, and some people I think probably do well with your group, and some probably don't. What would you advise them before they walk in the door to do before they see you?
Well, I think that in conversations with me, I like people who are authentic and can communicate what the problem is and what the opportunity is and how they're going to solve it without trying to be overly lofty. I mean, you can be going after big markets and believe that you can serve them and build a great company. But, it's that right combination of being audacious and yet still humble, open to learning, and still taking into account new information as it comes in.
Well, that's great. Well, in the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover?
Well, as I said, I'm excited to be introduced to the very best founders. So if there's anyone who's listening to this podcast and thinking, oh, that reminds me of so-and-so, or if you think you are yourself, happy to have a conversation. We are on the web at purposebuilt.vc. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter as well, and look forward to connecting with people.
Well, we'll put the LinkedIn profile and the website up there. What other ways should people communicate with you, or is website and LinkedIn fine?
Yeah, I think that's fine. As I mentioned, I'm also on Twitter, although I'm not super active, but you can certainly get me there. And I've made some good personal and business connections on Twitter. It's amazing how you can meet like-minded people there.
That's great. And what is your Twitter handle?
Miles Lasater, Lasater.
Very good. We'll put that on the show notes as well. I want to thank you for taking time to talk with us today, and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
All right, great. Thanks so much.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.